Live in Kansas, and then you just heard him live right here on Justice, reacting to Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court and more. Hello and welcome now to this special edition of Justice, live from the nation's capital. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks so much for being with us on this historic night in America. And thanks to all of you for once again making Justice #1 last weekend and keeping liars, leakers, and liberals on the New York Times bestsellers list. Who knew? And tonight, if you missed my exclusive interview with President Trump that just wrapped, we will air highlights again later in the show. Plus, we'll have brand new reaction to today's confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh and to the president's rally in Kansas from Kellyanne Conway, Dan Bongino, Matt Schlapp, and Congressman Darrell Issa. A great and exciting show tonight. But first, the president of the United States took a victory lap in Topeka, Kansas tonight, and you saw it live right here. Let's take a quick look at the highlights.
I stand before you today on the heels of a tremendous victory for our nation, our people, and our beloved Constitution. Just a few hours ago, the U.S. Senate confirmed Judge Brett Kavanaugh Brett Kavanaugh is a man of great character and intellect. He's a totally brilliant scholar who has devoted his life to the law. He is a loving husband, a devoted father, and a faithful public servant, and he always has been. What he and his wonderful family endured at the hands of Democrats is unthinkable. It's unthinkable. They threw away and threw aside every notion of fairness, of justice, of decency, and of due process. Nobody's seen anything like it. But each of you will have a chance in just 4 weeks to render your verdict on the Democrats' conduct at the ballot box. If Democrats are willing to cause such destruction in the pursuit of power, just imagine the devastation they would cause if they ever obtained the power they so desperately want and need. You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob, and that's what they've become. Under Republican leadership, America is booming. America is thriving. America is winning because we are finally putting America first. We are putting America first.
President Trump rallying the base in Topeka. Let's go back live now to Doug McElway, who was at that rally in Topeka, Kansas. Doug, okay, back with you.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, the President of the United States. And I can't really add anything to what you guys were just discussing a few minutes ago, but I can reiterate it. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the observation that this Mississippi rally, which was so widely disparaged across the media and by Democrats and Republicans in Washington, was a seminal changing moment in this whole affair over Kavanaugh. And what it demonstrates, again, is how the President has completely upended conventional political thinking in this country with the counterpunch. And even Brett Kavanaugh himself used the counterpunch after the formal hearing was done, and he had a chance to respond to these allegations and came forward with his defense, that very emotional defense. Most media observers, most court analysts said it was not reflective of good judicial temperament. We had a former Supreme Court justice saying it was a disqualifying characteristic, not good judicial temperament. But there are others who said it's what saved Kavanaugh's skin. It's what saved his nomination process. And then the president went to this rally in Mississippi where he actually dared to confront the accuser's testimony here. And it was a reminder to many, many Americans. It was something that was disparaged widely among Democrats in Washington, disparaged widely among Republicans in Washington, but among the Republican base, it was taken with open arms. In the aftermath of that rally, we saw contributions to the RNCC go up by over 1,000%. I think Dana Perino reported that today. We saw conservative never-Trumpers join Trump diehard supporters together for the first time in his presidency. What we're seeing here is that the counterpunch truly does work, Judge Nate.
And you know, Doug, I have to tell you, as we were speaking before we got the president on, it was the president's selection of someone who had worked in the Bush administration, which again was a brilliant move, that kind of, you know, coalesced all the Republicans behind this candidate. And the turning point, as you say, and I agree, and even the Washington Post. Yeah.
Right. The one thing I would add to all that, the thing to watch for over the next 30 days, though, is can Republicans maintain that momentum? There are some who feel that maybe it peaked today and it'll dwindle slightly over the next 30 days, while Democratic anger, let's not forget the women who are enraged over this confirmation right now, will they be able to mount their forces up, build the momentum where they are able to retain or take over control of the House, at which point everything changes. All the Republican investigations end to be replaced with Democratic investigations of such things as Judge Kavanaugh's past, a potential impeachment attempt of Judge Kavanaugh, and many investigations into the Trump agenda, Trump cabinet members, you name it. It will, the ground game will change entirely. So that's what this is all about, and that's why the president made this appearance in Topeka today, and why he will be traveling all across the country to these battleground states until the midterm election day, November 6th.
Well, and Doug McElway, you are absolutely right. The question coming out of this, how long can the Republicans maintain this enthusiasm? Will it take them through the midterms? Anyway, Doug McElway, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
And President Trump's right-hand woman, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, with her take on today's history-making day in Washington, as well as live reaction to my interview with the president on this special edition of Justice. It rolls on as Kellyanne joins me next. Don't go away.
Remember the leaking, right? The leaking, Dianne Feinstein. Did you leak? Did you leak, Dianne? Dianne, did you? No. I didn't. I don't think. Wait. Did we leak? No, he said no, we didn't. Oh. Was that the worst body language you've ever seen?
Welcome back to Justice. President Trump having some fun with Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein at tonight's rally in Topeka. He was in a great mood, and why not? It is truly a historic night for our country as our 114th Supreme Court Justice, Associate Justice, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, was sworn in just a short time ago. Joining me now with reaction to it all, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, one of the things that you said, which I thought was so appropriate, a quote of yours in an article today, it said, today, and the confirmation of Kavanaugh, of Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, is a crowning achievement of his presidency, of the President Trump's presidency. Why?
There's no question. And it's Justice Kavanaugh, it's Justice Gorsuch, and 26 U.S. Circuit judges. It is truly a part of President Trump's legacy, and he's not even been there for 2 years. He promised on the campaign trail that he would appoint constitutionalist judges who don't make up the laws they go along, who are impervious to political machinations, and he's delivered on that promise. And I think that much of the credit here also has to be shared with Leader McConnell and those in the Senate who saw through exactly what this is: hyper-partisanship, hysteria, dark money perhaps, but really a lot of dark language. And I'm so proud of Justice Kavanaugh for sticking with it. Many people and many presidents, Janine, most other presidents, really would have pulled the nomination and said, look, it's not good for you, it's not good for your family, it's not good for the country. They both stuck with it. That's the message to everybody's children tonight, too. You don't let yourself be bullied and lied about and insulted. You don't give in to the hysteria. You fight back if you know that you're innocent, and he did, and he's sitting on the Supreme Court. He'll be at work on Monday or Tuesday.
You know, I have chills as you say it, Kellyanne. You know, we're both lawyers. One of the things that frightened me, you know, as someone who's tried rape cases and decided what cases should go forward, was the idea that as women, they should unequivocally be believed, and that men should just call it a day. It was the upending of everything that you and I learned in law school about the presumption of innocence. And it frightened me. And I honestly believe that it frightened a lot of people in this country. This dictatorial, you must believe her irrespective of the fact that there's no corroboration. Not that you need it, but once you allege it, you got to prove it.
They saw that happening in real time. And if Americans were as gullible and naive and impressionable as many of the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee think that we are, then the outcome here may have been different. Do you realize that in the supplemental hearing featuring Judge Kavanaugh, after he had testified for 33 hours and already answered 1,200 written questions, already produced over 1 million documents, do you realize that very few of those Democrats, if any, Janine, mentioned the Constitution? They held up his yearbook. They didn't mention any of his 300 judicial opinions as a sitting judge in the D.C. Circuit. They showed a yearbook passage and quoted from it. So what you're saying is important. People should know that him sitting on the Supreme Court tonight is also a vote for the continuation of due process, presumption of innocence, and the fact that we don't line up according to our gender, that all women are victims, all men are perpetrators. It's horrible. And I'm glad that the good guys won here.
Well, and the idea of looking at victims through political lenses as opposed to true film lenses is frightening. Even to people who are maybe sitting on a jury. I mean, you know, it's got to be based on the facts. But I want to keep moving from that. In addition to that,
may I say one thing about that? I think what you said is incredibly important. Let's not leave that point. Most people in this country don't want to be part of the political process when it comes to something as personal as a sexual assault experience that they've had. And so to politicize that in this way, really for many women across this country who don't want to come forward and don't want to be part, don't want their own grief to be politicized, it added insult to injury for many of them. It was very obvious that the Democrats were using Christine Ford, sitting on that letter for 6 weeks, leaking it, not allowing her to testify privately in California, giving her the cameras and the Klieg lights. They certainly used Brett Kavanaugh. But they're also using many sexual assault victims who want to keep their stories private and not make them public and not be part of this political wreckage and shrapnel. And that really is a shame. And I think that did incense and infuriate and engage many Americans also.
Well, you're so right about that. Kellyanne Conway, thank you so much for being with us. I know you have a very busy night. We appreciate your stepping out to talk with us. Thank you, Kellyanne.
Great interview with the president.
Well, thank you. And Republican Congressman Darrell Issa, Dan Bongino, Matt Schlapp still ahead. Plus, in case you miss it, you'll hear more of my exclusive interview with the president in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
The only reason to vote Democrat is if you're tired of winning, right? Tired of winning. We want to win, win, win. I never get tired of it.
President Trump giving a rousing speech tonight in Kansas, hitting on a number of major topics. And joining me now with reaction to the president's speech and the historic Senate vote to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, California Republican Congressman Darrell Issa, who is here on set with me. All right, Congressman, what's your take on what happened today with Kavanaugh?
Well, I could be glib and I could say they didn't do a complete investigation because, of course, they don't know at what age he was potty trained.
Yeah.
But short of that, this is the most thorough over-investigation ever. We now have a justice on the Supreme Court who's been over-investigated by the Senate, disparaged by the Senate, and I'm confident he will go and he will put that behind him. He'll close the door and conduct himself in the way he has on the D.C. Circuit Court, and that's good for America.
You know, what's interesting, Congressman, as you talk about that, is this man was taken on such an emotional roller coaster from the citadel down to the dungeon of being a gang rapist and a sexual predator. It is such a drop. It had to be bittersweet for him tonight.
Well, if he ever has to stand in judgment over elected officials, at least he'll know how we feel. He will be the only person on the court that's ever faced that. Clarence Thomas, to a lesser extent, but never anything close to this. And that's really what's amazing about his confirmation with obviously Joe Manchin, a Democrat voting for him, is that he got through. He got through exactly the way someone would expect, which is the Democrats never wanted another person on the court, and we could have put the late Mother Teresa there, and they would have rejected her.
What about the fact that he was so trashed? He rises above it?
I think he rises above it. One of the things I found amazing, it's most of the public won't read it, but 600 and some law professors wrote that he was disqualified because of how he conducted himself when he answered the accusations of multiple attempted rapes. Now, it's beyond belief that you get disqualified, not based on a decade of sitting on the court with exactly the right demeanor, but responding the way a husband and a father and an upright citizen would do when you accuse him of multiple crimes.
Of which there is absolutely not an iota of evidence other than a very credible claim, but that was contradicted by everyone she said was her alibi and her corroborating witness. Do you fear, you're going to be leaving, and we're going to miss you in Congress. We're going to miss you having you on Justice, so maybe you'll come back. Do you fear where this country is right now with this mob rule, this mentality of get in their face by Congress people saying, you see someone, push them, get in their face?
Until that goes away, we're going to be exactly where we have been off and on for a while. But Judge, it's amazing to me, the America forgot that when George W. Bush was elected, 18 years ago, the beginning of my elected time in Congress, I saw people turn their backs at his inaugural. I saw members of Congress look me in the eye and say, he's appointed, not elected. We have, for some reason, periodically, episodically, lost our real belief that we serve America first, and then we serve our party sometime later. We've got to get back to that, and there are a few people, Joe Manchin was one of them, that do that.
All right, Congressman Darrell Issa, thanks so much for spending your time with us this evening. And Matt Schlapp and Dan Bongino can't wait to weigh in on all of this again. They're standing by. Plus, you're going to hear some of my wide-ranging exclusive interview with the president from just a few moments ago. Next. President Trump just wrapping up his rally in Kansas and his exclusive interview with me. The first since Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation. Take a look at part of that interview. Mr. President, even, aside from some of the protesters in Washington, there is an excitement. We have a Supreme Court justice. It's one of the highlights of your administration so far. You have to be very, very excited about what you accomplished, and you accomplished it.
Well, I am very excited, and, the protesters were a very small group, a tiny group of people. I just left tens of thousands of people in Kansas, and, it's amazing what's going in the country, and we have a great new Supreme Court justice, Janine, as you know very well.
I do. And Mr. President, you know, a lot of people, other presidents might have pulled the plug. And we were talking about this while we were trying to reconnect with you. There were a lot of other conservative justices that you could have said, okay, you know, let's try somebody else. And it wouldn't have been the first time a president did that. But you stuck with Kavanaugh during his darkest moments. Why?
Well, for one thing, it would have been very unfair to him if you think about it. He's a highly respected man. What the Democrats did was disgraceful. These things happened that just came out of the wind. There was no corroboration. There was no anything, Janine. This is a high-quality, brilliant man. He'll be a phenomenal Supreme Court justice. And it was my honor to stick. And I know that. A lot of people told me that. They said, well, we'll switch. You'll never get anybody like this. This is a very, very outstanding person and individual with an incredible family, and it would have been very unfair to him. What they did was disgraceful. What the Democrats did, and you saw that group with Blumenthal, who falsified his service in Vietnam, and a terrible mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Cory Booker, and, you know, the whole group, Dianne Feinstein, who, in my opinion, leaked the papers. It was terrible what was happening and what was happening. Very unfair, so I did stick to me, yes. And I'm very happy.
And you know, Mr. President, you have a very uncanny instinct. You have a gut sense of things, and you were very disciplined after Christine Ford came out and the left was going wacky. But there was one point where you pivoted in a rally in Mississippi just a few days ago. You went off script, and some people said that you were extremely unkind to Christine Ford. But what was it that got you to pivot from your restraint about her and to fight for Kavanaugh at that point?
Well, there were a lot of things happening that weren't correct. They weren't true. And there were a lot of things that were left unsaid. And I thought I had to even the playing field because it was very unfair to judge. Now I can, you know, very nicely say Justice Kavanaugh.
Right.
And,
right.
It was a very unfair situation. So I evened the playing field. And once I did that, it started to sail through. He was treated very, very unfairly, Janine.
And Mr. President, you know, when you say it started to sail through, even the Washington Post, I'm going to repeat that, even the Washington Post, top of the fold today, talks about the fact that when you went off script and you went after Christine Ford, saying nothing that wasn't already true, talking about her memory failures regarding the fundamentals of her assault, they said it was a turning point to victory, that when you did that, you turbocharged the momentum behind Kavanaugh. When his fate was most in doubt, I mean, there's no question that he has to turn around and the country and recognize that what you did was instinctive, it was guttural, and you did it, and you won.
Well, I think it was a very important moment. It was a very big turning point, as the Washington Post was actually, shockingly, they said something that was very positive, and I'm very proud of it because we're going to have a great, great justice of the Supreme Court for many years. And I fought hard to make sure that he got on. And you're going to see what happens. You're going to see how great he will be and will become. I have no doubt about it at all.
All right. So coming out of this, should there be consequences, Mr. President, to those people who promoted falsehoods? When you look at someone like that lawyer Avenatti, who, you know, the allegations that he was promoting when he brings out this alleged victim were so preposterous that they dissipated on their own. Should this person be held for the falsehoods, not just in terms of grievances with the Bar Association, but even beyond that?
Well, he made false accusations about me on another matter, totally false, a joke, when just a disgrace that they're able to do it. I'd love to see our libel laws get toughened up so you could take people and sue them.
Exactly.
But he made the same thing, totally false statements. You look at what happened, and yes, I think they should be held liable. I would say they should be held to the highest standard. You can't go around and whether it's making up stories or making false statements about such an important position, you can't do that. You destroy somebody's life. And there were many, many false things that were said about a very fine man. And would have destroyed his family if this didn't happen. And it all came together in the end, and people realized it was false accusation, false statement. It was really something very interesting and actually very nice to see, because he suffered, Janine. That was really unfair. I watched that very closely, and he suffered with false statements made about him, things that never happened.
Did the Democrats make a tactical mistake that worked to Republicans' advantage, unfortunately, with Brett Kavanaugh as a sacrificial lamb, who I believe, and I'm just going to say it again, the turnaround was you in Mississippi. But did they make a tactical mistake, and is their anger going to carry them to the midterms in a positive way?
Well, I think they overplayed their hand. I think they were very dishonest with the leaks and other things that they did. Even look at the lawyers representing certain people. They're right out of the Democrat playbook. They've represented others that are Democrats. That's what they do. How did they end up with all these lawyers that are always the same ones? And I won't even go into names, but I think they overplayed their hand. And I can tell you that the enthusiasm and the love and the feeling in the Republican Party right now is higher than I've ever seen it. And you see polls that are going up like rocket ships, races that are going to be won by margins on races, frankly, that the Republicans wouldn't have won. And now they're leading, and they're just better. We need more votes so that we can cut taxes, even more so that we can do things that they will never do. They're going to open borders, and crime is going to pour in. We want to have no crime. We want to have borders where you come into the country legally. You come in through a legal process, and so many things. The enthusiasm for the Republican Party is the strongest I've ever seen it, Janine, and it happened all over the last 2 to 3 weeks.
The panel is next, and tonight it's two of your favorites. CPAC Chair Matt Schlapp, NRA TV host Dan Bongino standing by live with their take on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and my interview with President Trump next.
America to remain a sovereign, great country, then you must organize, mobilize, register, and vote Republican. We need more Republican votes.
Joining me now with reaction to my interview with President Trump and his lively speech tonight to a huge crowd of supporters in Kansas, political panel, CPAC Chair Matt Schlapp, NRA TV contributor, former Secret Service Dan Bongino. All right, Dan, I'll go to you first. You heard the president in my discussion with him. What stuck out in your mind?
Well, first thing is that, again, Trumpism has been entirely vindicated. You know, Judge, the Iron Triangle's dominated the GOP for years. The activist groups, the media, and the swamp. And Trump keeps continuing to beat the snot out of all of them politically. He just doesn't back down, and they're panicking. And you saw more of that tonight in this speech where he just ran up the score. And I love that about him.
I got to tell you, I never heard that term, beat the snot. I mean, that's good for Saturday night. What stuck out?
I'm a Queens guy.
It's been a long week, okay?
It's been an exhausting week, and I must tell you, I think all Americans, I really don't care what side you're on, have to say, you know, hopefully we can move on from this. Do you think it's possible, or is it not possible for the left in this outrageous display of anti-constitutional principles?
Okay, so here's the deal. We are split 50-50. As we all know, is an incredibly close presidential race. It's going to take the American people looking at these crazy people who are literally right outside this window and saying, I don't trust them with majorities in Congress, for us to be able to make a bigger difference and get these larger Republican majorities in Congress to push the Trump agenda. It's in the hands of the American voter.
Well, Dan, and what do you think the Republicans have to do to maintain the enthusiasm or the anger?
Well, I think we're on the House side. It's a toss-up right now if we hold the House. But I think on the Senate side, there's no question these ruthless, disgusting, filthy attacks on Kavanaugh have galvanized Republican voters. And I think we actually stand a pretty darn good chance, Judge, of picking up a few seats in the Senate, even flipping some. Florida, where I live, he's in a lot of trouble, Nelson.
But why just the Senate and not the House?
Because in the House you have No, absolutely. But the way you have with gerrymandering, you have the suburban districts that we've had a tough time with. We can't just completely dismiss the fact that Democrat anger is real. It's just that I think Republican anger at a statewide level, well, it may be enough to counteract it on the Senate side. We may have trouble with some of these districts, though.
If we do well enough in these Senate races, we could pick up 2 to 5 Republicans on the Senate side. If we do well enough in these races, we have a good chance of holding on to that House majority. This Kavanaugh confirmation puts the Republican House majority in a much better place.
You know, the president tweeted on Ted Cruz, this was in August. He said, "I'll be doing a major rally for Senator Ted Cruz in October. I'm picking the biggest stadium in Texas we can find. As you know, Ted has my complete and total endorsement. His opponent is a disaster," and he goes on. So the president ain't slowing down, Dan. He gets energized by these rallies. I've seen him in them, several of them. He's not going to quit.
No, and Judge, you know what? I'm glad you brought this up, because this just mutes another one of these dopey liberal attacks against the president. That, oh, he's so small and petty. Really? Ted Cruz and him went at it in the primary. He's doing a rally for him. Him and Susan Collins have not been friends, Judge. Everybody watching tonight knows that. What did he do today? Came out, Susan Collins did a great job. It just goes to show how petty the media is, not the president.
Yeah, and it goes to show that he's definitely going to follow through on getting the deals done. Yeah. And finally, as we look at this going forward again, is this day going to galvanize the women?
Absolutely. Look, the Democrats have lost their double-digit advantage with women. Women actually looked at what happened with Brett Kavanaugh, and they felt like there was something unfair about the process. And don't worry about Republicans not having the enthusiasm. If we had gotten this wrong and lost on this Kavanaugh vote, I would be depressed, because we would also lose big in November. I feel the opposite today.
All right, Matt Schlapp and Dan Bongino, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And we'll be back in a moment.
Leaders apologize for America. And now you have a president who is standing up for America.
A big night indeed for President Trump. And finally, as the president indicated in my interview with him just a few minutes ago, First Lady Melania Trump returning and scheduled to arrive home tomorrow morning from her diplomatic and humanitarian visit to Africa. Take a look at some of these pictures. Although I'd like to, she made a comment that we should focus on what she does and not what she wears. But sometimes I can't help myself. Don't forget to pick up your copy of my new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. It's a bestseller. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Jeanine Pirro, advocate.